Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Human Behavior Podcast. Today's episode is sort of the next step after last week's episode, where we discussed how important it is to focus on the background action or the context or scene that you are observing, because the seemingly mundane environmental signals are actually the foundation for observing human behavior. So for this episode, we are talking about anomaly detection, putting together the breadcrumbs, connecting the dots, and why it's so hard to do that in the moment. As you all know, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback a situation while sitting in a chair watching a YouTube video, but when you're in the middle of the situation, it's much more difficult. For this episode, Greg shared a couple of stories where he and a few other people didn't connect the dots in the moment, and then we go on to explain why this happens, and we give some examples of how to prime yourself so you can get better at connecting the dots. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoy this episode. And if you want more, you can check out our Patreon channel where we have a lot more content as well as subscriber-only episodes of the show. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd kindly ask that you leave us a review. And more importantly, please share it with a friend. Thank you for your time. And don't forget that training changes behavior. All right, Greg, we are rolling here now. So good morning.
Morning.
We have officially saved the daylight once again this year. So we've made it through daylight savings time. So congratulations, everyone, for saving the daylight. Still want them to stop doing this. But anyway, today's topic du jour is sort of a continuation from last week's episode, where we're really talking about non-standard observations and really understanding this sort of background noise in your environment or background setting to really kind of get you the context for different observations, especially when it comes to human behavior. So I figured this week, I want to talk about sort of anomaly detection and really just like connecting the dots, right? So people often say, hey, I saw something odd, or this seemed weird to me, but it's good. Maybe you see something, but it's really connecting it all together and putting it all together and getting the so what is the most important part, right? Because humans do odd stuff all the time. Most of it doesn't really matter at all. There's a lot of noise out there. So it helps if it's more like domain specific, but I kind of want to go over that stuff, and then also sort of why we miss those things. There's a lot of investigations or after action reviews, and afterwards it's very easy to see, which is why there's so many people making videos and talking about things that already happened in the past. I don't see a lot of them going out and showing stuff, but that's a separate issue, I guess. But it is, it's always, of course, hindsight 2020 and, Monday morning quarterbacking. There's all those terms for a reason, right? It's in the moment in time. So I was hoping that, again, you could start off. You have a couple sort of personal stories, and it came from another lessons learned that you wrote. So then, of course, any of our Patreon subscribers, you can go on there, read the whole thing, which I would highly suggest, because there's some great stories that go along with it. Maybe you'll mention some of them here, but I mean, meaning stuff you can read about, news stories in the headlines, not just your personal ones. And there's a ton of great information in there, but there's this one section, sort of, I guess I'll have you read, because it's some personal stories that are kind of exactly what I'm talking about. And of course, we teach this stuff too, because how many examples do we use of us missing things in the moment, and then afterwards, and the slap in the forehead, should have had a V8, what the hell was screaming at me. And so I like those personal examples too, because, it kind of shows how that stuff can happen. And then since we were there, obviously we can break everything down because we're the ones involved in the incident. So, that's sort of, I guess, a little intro for today, Greg, and I'll let you jump into it.
I appreciate that, Brian. Good morning, everybody. We're going to talk about volume 25 of Lessons Learned. It's all about Allison Rainey's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. And the section that Brian had highlighted is called The Right Place at the Right Time. Sometimes the crime scene you're approaching stuns you. Sometimes it's events leading up to your arrival. Generally, Hollywood has no idea how strange it is working the streets, catching the bad guys, and then trying to connect the dots on human behavior pattern recognition and analysis. I'll give you a couple of personal examples. On a rainy night after midnight in the suburban metropolitan Detroit industrial area, a uniformed street cop called out a license plate of a suspicious vehicle. The road where the copper found this sled, a vehicle in street terminology, didn't have an access ramp to the I-696 freeway. So often midnight shift RA, robbery armed suspects, would take this particular street accidentally, thinking they could wind up wind through the sparsely occupied factories without being seen by coppers, and then access I-696 quickly, and then be on their way south into Detroit scot-free. So any night, especially a rainy night, meant that traffic in this region was suspicious and needed to be checked. Many times, police checked the vehicles in this area because there were lazy cops who chose to park here and catch a couple hours of shut-eye. And they didn't want to surprise a burglary boy or get victimized while they slept. And this is one such story. The copper first drove by the vehicle, noticed it was running, headlights on, stuck in the mud off of a tor. And that tor is a triangular-shaped corner where two streets meet. And, the driver's door was open. The personal account of this copper was that he first jotted down the plate and then went to take a piss and get some sleep behind a neighboring closed factory. And when he emerged sometime later, he noted the vehicle was still there, still running, headlights on, door open, and still stuck in the mud. The rain's pouring down relentlessly. And at this point, the officer runs the plate and calls for a wrecker. Now, as the officer was alone and he hadn't called out a traffic stop, just a suspicious vehicle running unoccupied, I drove up from the south end of the city to see if he needed any help. When I arrived, he told me what he observed, and I asked him if he'd searched the area for a suspect, presumably the driver, on foot. And he told me he had not. And based on my personal experiences, calls I had investigated myself, I advised the veteran officer to make sure he checked under the vehicle when there were wreck arrives, as I found a couple of people who had lived or died after running themselves over with their own vehicle. And while I was checking the rainy, dark recesses of the abandoned businesses, I heard the officer with an excited voice call for a coroner and a traffic unit. When the wrecker lifted the vehicle out of the mud, the missing driver was discovered under the vehicle, deceased. It's actually simpler to die in this manner than you think. When you're trying to get your vehicle unstuck, you sometimes put your vehicle in reverse, and then you open the driver's door and watch the rear left driver's side tire to see if it's spinning. Now, if the vehicle should suddenly lurch, the open door strikes you, pushing you under the front left driver's side tire. And voila, the car is now stopped because you're no longer there to press the accelerator and positioned directly on top of you. This veteran copper was a bit of a bad luck or good luck shit magnet. Each caper I was in with him was more bizarre than the last. And one night in that same general area, a uniformed officer heading west on the freeway that bisects Detroit from the suburbs from each other in the dark early mornings, he called out a vehicle hauling the mail, his vernacular for speeding. And when he became annoyed by the other vehicle, one traveling faster than he was, he finally stopped it, intending to give the driver a good tongue lashing. He told me it was immediately impeded by a language barrier and that there was difficulty in communication. So I stopped by to check on the solo veteran copper, stopping a car on midnight shift. And upon arrival, he mentioned that both drivers and the front seat passenger were soaking wet. On this specific night, there was no rain, and sometimes when burglary suspects pull commercial jobs, they accidentally hit the sprinkler system, getting in or out of the building and become soaked. So I decided to take a look for myself. Again, a personal experience. So both men were covered head to toe with blood and human particulates, the kind of junk you get on yourself when you're carving up a side of beef with a hatchet in the dark. And sure enough, moments into the stop, another unit, a very recent homicide, was on the radio stating they had multiple victims at their scene. A couple of the decedents had been virtually beheaded, and the detective mentioned that whoever the fleeing suspects were, they'd likely be covered in blood. The suspects were arrested in short order after it was determined that the victims and the suspect both spoke the same language and were of the same Eastern European region. And even a broken clock tells the right time twice a day. So from the unbelievable but true file, I'll add one more incident from that same city. Two very average police officers were headed to breakfast instead of checking their assigned area after on-duty roll call. And fate had them subcutting. That's when a driver takes a shortcut through a residential subdivision to avoid heavy traffic posed by drivers headed to work or back home on the major surface streets. So while on some non-distinct side street that goes from here to there, just after 8 a.m, they encounter a man running out of the residential driveway into the street directly in front of them. They stop short, primarily because they almost hit him, and additionally because they notice he's covered from blood from his waist to his shoulders. So these coppers called it into dispatch as a medical run, advising they were going to be taking this victim of a lawn mowing accident to the closest hospital. The bloody subject advised the officers that he had cut his hands, dislodging some trash from the lawnmower, and now he needed emergency medical service as he had cut his hands. The officers had the suspect jump in the back, and they drove him a few miles away to Macomb Hospital Center. They never got out of their patrol car, not to search him, identify him, get his name, nothing. Not even open the door for him when he got in. After pulling up at the emergency entrance, the passenger officer gets out of the vehicle and lets the subject out of the back seat, because police vehicles don't allow the backseat passenger the luxury of opening the doors on their own. And moments later, after arriving at their favorite breakfast location, the officers learned that the suspect that they just dropped off at the hospital had no injuries. The blood was donated from the homicide victim he had just murdered. When he was escaping the crime scene, he fled through the backyards, hopped the fences, and onto the next street, where he ran right in front of a marked police unit. The morning shift officers had driven the suspect away from the scene into a local ER, where he was apprehended after cleaning up in the restroom and attempting to hitch a ride back to the scene to recover his suspect vehicle. Apathy can get you killed, and it happens to the best of us. I made a stop on a suspicious vehicle in the North End while I was headed for a late off-duty roll call. The sun's already up. I had a long night of chasing bad guys, and I was extremely tired. Remember, you're most susceptible to danger when you're mentally tired, bored out of your mind, or completely overwhelmed by events, and I was mentally tired. I noticed the vehicle doing a slow roll through the sub, and it was occupied by 4 people. It rolled through a stop sign like it was free, and immediately upon stopping them, I'm getting a bad rendition of who's on first from the occupants. An important clue we call verbal diarrhea, and I knew right then I was in the trick bag. I made an interesting observation. The passengers were wearing 3 or 4 jackets each, and nice ones like leather, faux fur, and it didn't fit the morning I was in, and especially since they were all, methy McCrackheads. I also noted that some of them had 2 or 3 watches on their wrist, and an assortment what appeared to be fake or real jewelry on their fingers, around their necks, on their ears. Perhaps I would have, been more well rested. I would have added up these anomalies quickly. And thank God the street guards were looking out for me. I called for a cover car. As soon as the cover car rolls up, we're off to the races. Each suspect flees in a different direction. And thankfully, we were able to round them up in short order. And soon the day shift was taking multiple locations where burglaries had occurred. I found out later that the driver was dangerous and wanted, and the booking officer located the knives that were pictured below in the driver's front pockets. There's one of the gravity knives and a switchblade, and it was quite big, as I remember. I started to shake. I was guilty of DWHUA, driving while head up ass, and I had the happy head. I knew I was almost at the police station. And from riding horses for a long time, it's like a horse heading back to the barn. The hardest time to control your horse and get them to pay attention is when they're headed back to the barn. That's why most accidents occur within just a few blocks of your home. You think I got this, yet your mind is already checked out.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
You know those books that made you fall asleep in high school English class? They can also help you grow leadership skills you can use right now. My name is Hassan Sorrells, and I am the host of the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast. On this podcast, we read selections from great literature in the West and globally, and extract lessons from those books that can help your transformation to becoming a better leader today. Because reading and understanding great literature is better than reading and trying to understand yet another business book. Listen and subscribe to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast on all the major podcast players like this one, and tell all your colleagues in leadership. And thanks.
So those are obviously some pretty good stories, and there's more in there, folks. And like I said, so if the Patreon subscribers, you can read the whole thing, see the photos and stuff that go along with it, because it obviously adds a lot to the story. But they're just I wanted you to go over those because they're just such great examples of all these little things adding up, and you're sitting here in the clear light of day going, how did you not see this happening? It's like, well, I'll tell you why you didn't see this happening. So, again, like on the, because you brought up you brought up a few, cognitive performance factors, and then you just talked about apathy, and then being tired, and then now you're heading back to the barn, so to speak, of why you sort of miss this stuff, and it just goes to things we've talked about in different episodes where you cannot be 100% all the time. You just can't have this heightened level of awareness all the time. It's not how it really works. You'll either get burnt out that way, or you'll just create really bad corrupt file folders and non-event feedback loops, and then your brain just figures, oh, if I just stay in this state, then I don't have to worry about anything, because you won't actually see anything. So I guess we'd start it with sort of like anomaly detection, and then what we would call pattern recognition, and connecting the dots, because that's what pattern recognition is really just connecting the dots for the purpose of using the information, right? Each one of those things, if I'm just looking at things in my environment just for the hell of it, okay, it might be great observation exercise for fun, but the so what is that? It's what is the so what? How are you using this information in some helpful manner? So I just wanted to start it and frame it there, Greg.
No, it's wonderful. And there's 1, 2, 3 things that you brought up that I wrote down while you were talking that are very important. Number one, humans don't attend to their surroundings. Humans go day to day to take a poop, to get something to eat, to make love, to watch a TV show, to work, to make money, to make love, take a poop, and watch TV. What they're not doing is processing the information that's around them. They're not. And that is the essence of situation awareness, is being aware that you're in a situation. And if you don't attend to it, that you might get in a traffic crash or get kidnapped or robbed or anything else. So the very first thing is, you can't attend to a bunch of stuff. You can attend to one, and you can only give 100% of your focus, your attention to that thing. So when you're driving back from a busy night on the road, the last thing you think that you're going to encounter is a carload of felons. And that's the first thing that you should think you're going to encounter, and that should tighten your shot group. So when you're driving, you go, hey, I need to be a little more alert and aware than I am right now. I'm going to be in the trick bag if I don't. Now, second thing, non-event feedback loop. The problem is, if we're not pinging our environment, if we're not throwing a rock into the pond gives us no ripples. So even though those events are happening around us in real time, Brian, we don't see them, smell them, taste them, or feel them. Why? Because we're not looking for them. So that's why we say things come out of nowhere. The nowhere they come out of is that vacuous space between our ears that is seeing the monkey playing the ukulele, rather than going, holy shit, this guy's changing lanes very fast. I wonder what he's up to. And that's why I use interesting, not suspicious.
Right.
Because everything in life is suspicious, right?
Well, it can be if you want it to.
Yeah, it can, right. but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
People, when they write and when they make movies and they do all the things that we normally see, they have to go the dun, dun, dun. So we tune in that there's something suspicious. But that's not how life works. Life should work on your interest level. This is more interesting than that. So therefore, I'm going to give it more of my attention. And the third thing you said that really ties these together for me, and don't let me forget the breadcrumbs, right? You made a point at the very beginning of the podcast about noise. And I would tell everybody that noise is another good meter to think about how your brain processes information. We're like the three bears. Not enough noise, I can't sleep. I mean, I can't hear a thing. It's absolutely antiseptic in my environment. So what do? I turn on the TV as background noise, or the radio, or I get one of them wave things, right? Yeah, right? Why? Because I can't relax, because my brain is too busy and it's listening for that silence, right? And then the second thing is the clinically just right. Hey, I lay down, I fall asleep almost immediately. I don't hear any, oh, wait a minute. What was that downstairs? Okay, so now I hear that, aberrant noise, something that I didn't expect, and now I'm going to tune into it. And then the fourth level would be too much noise. Like you and I both suffer from tinnitus or tinnitus, depending on what doctor you go to. And with me, I got my own permanent
I have
all the
to
time.
Have that. Otherwise, my brain provides the noise with the tinnitus.
It does, So I would say that's how you learn to reckon with your environment. Look, I almost got killed because it was 4-1 odds in broad daylight, and I got my head squarely right up my ass. And these guys had just come from burglary. I learned later how they did the burglary and that they're taking everything from the scene. And the guy with the knives on it, he was the one that always fought himself out with the cops. There some Sterling Heights coppers, and we're going to be training in Sterling Heights, had recently had this guy flee from them and stole cars and fought with the officers. So look, I'm in the frame of mind as, look, you guys lost, I'll get you back to the freeway. I'm in the frame of mind as, you guys don't belong here, head back down south, or I'll get serious. I'm so focused on other things that these cues, like, why would they have 3 or 4 different watches on the wrist? Clearly, they're going through drawers, and as soon as they find something, they've done it before, it's not their first rodeo, they're sliding them up there because it's easier to carry. Why did they have their pockets filled with jewelry and knives and stuff? Because as they're finding stuff, they're throwing out. Why the extra jackets? When you're looking through, you go, nice, 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 nice. What do? You're only 100 pounds because you're smoking the crack. So you're throwing those jackets on top of each other. So even if you have to flee from the suspect vehicle, Brian, you've got something to take to the pawn shop. You've got something to sell or trade for that dope. And so all those cues, and I'd seen this before, that's the problem. And none of it's making sense because I didn't engage in sense making. Sense making is a process. It's a thing you must engage in. It does not happen naturally. Now, your brain does have left and right lateral limits. My favorite song growing up from The Who was a rock opera, Tommy, the Pinball Wizard, where they said a deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays a mean pinball. Why? Because I knew I was tuned into a frequency, Brian, that not all of my neighbors had, that nobody in my family seemed to have. My dad was the closest to me because I was this empath. I'm reading things in the environment. So I knew I had that ability, but guess when that ability went away? When I was drinking, okay? When I was tired, when I just got up in the morning and I didn't have a clear head. And so we're most vulnerable to missing the breadcrumbs when we have moments of sheer boredom and moments of sheer uncanny stress. And the certain types of jobs that are, how does an industrial accident occur? Many times the industrial accident occurs because I'm not tuned in exactly to what I'm doing. And I say, well, I'll hold that with my foot for just a second and something spins off the lathe and then, I've got a catastrophic.
Well, and then you know that. That's a great example too with the industrial stuff. But that's why even every pilot has a checklist that they go down. No matter how many times they've flown that plane, how many hours, you still have a checklist. Why? So you don't miss anything. But the problem is, especially with the situations you brought up in your everyday life, there is no checklist. You can't go down through those things in a sense. Even though you kind of already did, because I'm listening to you tell the story, and you're setting it up for the purposes of telling the story, but it's actually how you sense make. It's like, well, they're cutting through this neighborhood. Well, a lot of people do that so they can avoid this busy street, especially if it's rush hour. I've seen that. Everyone's seen that who lives in a residential neighborhood. I've got it right here out in front of my house, where especially during the morning rush to people going to work and then kids going to school, there's this road out here. They even put the big speed bumps in because people drive 50 miles an hour.
Right.
So, when it's like 30
and a little orange guy with the finger and a little flag, right?
It's going downhill too. So that's the problem, is that people aren't even realizing that it's like, dude, you're doing 40 and there's kids going to school on the sidewalk next to you. But so that's part of it. So you're actually laying it all out. Those you're connecting, you're not connecting the dots, even though the breadcrumbs are all there, right? So it's all there. You're going, well, he's subcutting here. Well, that's odd. He's got an extra watch on. He's got this. And it's like that denial is still so strong sometimes, because your brain is always telling you, look, man, just you're almost off shift, or you're going home, or you know what I mean? It's probably nothing, because 99 out of 100 times it is exactly what you think what it typically is, or nothing. You know what I'm saying? And and if you're just a normal person going through your life, I would say that number increases to 99.9999. You know what I mean? Because you don't intercount that. You're telling us from the perspective of a police officer, where you are seeing those things more often. You are, involved in these situations more often. But, the average person, that's why it's like we always talk about, I always do the gas stations and parking lots. It's like, look, you go fill up your car with gas all the frickin' time. Everything you see on TV is a gas station being robbed, or a shooting at a gas station, or a drug deal gone wrong at a gas station. Yet you just go in there blindly. I'm like, these are those points. So it's still so powerful when it comes to things like denial and not putting that together. So can you talk about those sort of breadcrumbs and why we don't always connect the dots, even when they're apparent, even when I'm going, well, I saw this, then I saw this and thought that was odd. And I appreciate you explaining sort of, you call that these are things I find interesting, not suspicious. I think people get that wrong or understand some of our points we make sometimes, especially on the social media, even though you say, like, you'll be in a video and it's like, well, that's interesting to me. And people are like, hey, there's nothing suspicious about what we're doing. And I have to go back and look through the videos. Like, wait, he never said the word suspicious the entire time.
Exactly.
They filled that in with their own brain.
Because they're priming themselves by using an inner dialogue that doesn't fit the scenario, because we're primed, we're programmed that when we see a video, like a dear friend of us sent that video this morning, and I'm going, okay, why would this camera be set up at this intersection? Why would this behavior be being tracked? And that's why when I started that, rather than saying this is bogus, I started by saying this leaves me conflicted, because these things are interesting, but I can't account for them. That's how you should go through life. Because now you're not
and then, of course,
to make a decision.
You said, I want to hear Brian's opinions. And I was like, yeah, this video is junk.
Yeah.
Here's a better one.
The first 3 words, this bit blows, Exactly. So the idea is, when we make checklists, and everybody makes checklists, everybody says we are not going to have check in the box training, and then they bring out the checklist of the things that you're going to do during the training. Am I lying? Okay. So the idea is stop. First of all, stop lying to yourselves and everybody around you. We all know it. But what makes a list? So everything makes a list. So first of all, we go, okay, well, we're only going to make these 3 essential things, but then the guy could be walking or running. So that means 5 essential things. But if he has a car, well, a car is different than a truck. And then now the next thing we know, we have 72 pages, Brian, and we have 2 blank pages at the end for our marker that we can add those things onto. That's not how life works. Life works that you have to look at the level of interest of a thing in its environment and anticipate likely spirals. And I'll give you why we missed that in a second. So I'm driving northbound on Waltham from 8 Mile, headed back. I was always late for roll call. I was always see me after roll call getting yelled at by the supervisor. Why? Because I gave my exact shift. And when my shift ended, then I went to the station and checked out of my vehicle and went up, and roll call's over. Why? Because folks would head in 30 minutes early for off-duty roll call just to sign out, and half of them were asleep in the off-duty roll call room. I didn't like that. I like to work right up to the wire. And you know who else knew the cops went in 30 minutes early? All the bad guys.
Yeah.
So all the bad guys were hitting places out there, and I was always getting these incredible felonies at dawn from midnight shift. So I'm going northbound, and this Vic is cooking southbound. I mean, he's really hauling a mail. You used the story earlier. So I pull over to just get a look at what's going on inside the vehicle, and I see 4 of the nicest tires and rims. Brian, I want you to imagine a standard car, Camaro, a Nova, from the old days, the car that you drive today, right? I want you to imagine that with 4 tires and rims perfectly put together, just off of a vehicle, right? Inside the vehicle with you. It would be a little cramped, okay?
Yeah.
So the back seat's loaded, the front passenger seat's loaded, and this kid that I go by, he looks at me like, holy crap, what's going on? So really quickly, I go down the checklist. Well, he's taking those tires to a vehicle that's broken down, and he bought them in Warren. Warren's an automotive center. It's like 4 minutes after 7. You know what I'm saying? Nothing's open this early. Take a look. He's clipping. He's on the back street. So all I do is hit the wigwags and flip a U, and we're off to the races, right? So the idea is that things present themselves to you all day long. The breadcrumbs are on the ground, and when we step over the breadcrumbs, we go, somebody should sweep that up or we're going to get ants.
Yeah.
We never, ever assume that there's other likelihoods. So the range of likelihoods can't go on forever. I used to argue with the Marines about that all the time, because there was a difference between East Coast Marines and West Coast Marines at different points in their careers. And they would go, more information necessary. No, Gary Klein, you don't need more information necessary. You need to make a choice. Now, I'm not bagging on Klein. Klein's a genius, and the stuff that he does is well thought out. And I would suggest them reading that after they bought our gosh damn textbook first. But the idea is that we are in positions, Brian, you as a scout sniper and me as a copper, where we had to make the call based on the best information in that time at that place now. So if you want to make a good decision, what you got to do is you got to sense make the shit out of it fast. And the idea was that I had to plug different holes and go, okay, guy's coming from this, now it's not open. The guy's going fast, well, he just wants to make the light. The guy's got the tires, he's helping a buddy out. And you know what? None of them passed the smell test. So I give myself a rule of 3. And in those 3, if I can't get that, then immediately I have to say something else is going on I'm the problem. I'm just not tuned into that radio frequency. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you're going down those sort of, well, what could this likely be, and you're playing out those explanatory storylines, and then you're trying to gather artifacts and support those claims, and if there's nothing there, then it has to be something else. And this kind of goes back to what you're doing was sort of my question too, is how can I prime myself to not only spot those, but more importantly, sort of put them together and derive some sort of meaning from it, right? You gave those examples of the tire ones, great, because it's like, well, why would he have 4 tires if he's going to replace 1 tire, or why would he have this?
Exactly.
And why would it be at this time? And those simple questions actually typically answer most things, because most things only fit, most things only fit a certain story or a certain pattern or a certain likelihood level, right? And it's not about what I see almost people trying to do, especially with different experiments that I've seen, which are not very well done. But, it's like you're trying to use some sort of statistical model of inference to determine some percentage of likelihood, and it's like, well, no, it's not like that. You don't need to do that, because each one of those events are different in a sense, because there's so many different factors involved that are different. But what it is which is it more likely? The guy's going to change a tire for his buddy who just got a flat, or he just ripped those from somewhere, because you don't need 4 new ones if you're going to fix it flat, and nothing's open at that time. And so you can kind of run down that checklist, but and again, it's just, how do I prime myself to do that? I mean, we give some examples like that's why we tell people, look for the feral cats in your neighborhood, because it's an observation game,
right? And
feral cats hide in negative space. They hide underneath cars, in between buildings. So you're going to see them. So you're going to get some.
Forces you to tune in.
Well, and you're going to get a little reward. You're going to get that dopamine, because you will start seeing more cats than you ever thought that were out there. So it's in a sense, it's a game, but it's a reward based game that also forces you to look into negative space, to slow down and go into those little areas, the seams and gaps, because that's where feral cats hide out. They don't just strut down the middle of the damn street, So it's like, we give those examples, but how do I do that? How do I prime myself for that?
No, it's such a great question, Brian. And again, you got me writing stop. It's too early in the morning, and I'm feeling a little dicey from staying at that crappy hotel in Houston.
Yeah.
Those guys can bite me. I do not feel well. So here's the thing, Brian. Heuristics are with us, and they surround us always. And those are template and prototypical matches of what we know in our internal baseline, my experiences, my external baseline, things I've seen in life, right? And so everybody goes, those are your personal experiences. No, I see things when I drive to work, and I will notice if the billboard has changed, or I will notice if that place is torn down overnight. Those are different experiential comparisons than my internal baseline. Look, I've made an arrest 75 times at the same street corner, and each time the person had a gun. So on the 76th, I'm going to be patting you down. Those are 2 different standards. So those are my heuristics, right? Then the next one that I use generally is geo. The first couple of examples I gave you were geographics. For example, the area of the freeway where all the factories were closed, but still we have vehicles back there idling. So a lot of people make love, but people don't pull over to try to make love in an area of haunted houses and decapitation. So this area was one of those where you had to really know where this area dead ended, right, to get back there, and it was creepy. So somebody back there is up to no good, or they're lost, and you got to get them out of there. So that's a geo. Seeing that subcut in Vic and doing the slow roll, that was a geo. And then guess what? As you start going, well, that's interesting, you pull up your Atmo file, and all of a sudden the atmospherics start to change, right? The vehicle starts accelerating away from you, or you notice the driver adjusting the rear view mirror to get a better look at who's behind him, and now the people start chattering, and you see some, movement inside the Vic as if they were going to try to conceal something. All of those things happen, but they happen right in front of you, and if you're not tuned in, that movie's still playing. You just missed it. You missed all those cues, right? The cues were never not present. There's no way to conceal them. And then what do? Well, all of a sudden now I'm on the traffic stop, and I see the bio. Your histamines are up, your nostrils are flared, you're sweating, and it's not an area where you should be sweating. And that's where the kinesics, the icing, the frosting, the sparkles on the cake come in. And I notice that the person is nodding yes for no, or I see that the person continues to take a look at the person in the back seat before they answer me. Why would you do that? And then you tell me you don't know the person, and it's my grandma's car. So the idea is I give you this rich volume. I give you a palette. That's the word I'm looking for. You ever see the thing that the guy sticks his thumb through and it's got all the different colors on it? Remember that? I think it was Bob Ross or whatever his name was. That. Yeah. Okay, so think of that color palette for a minute, and then we give you a semi. Human behavior pattern recognition analysis gives you a semi that's wrapped in visqueen and it's white and it's perfect. You paint the story. Now, you know how that book, Peter Griffin, Lois, I had my thumb there, Lois, where he's reading a book and he knows what the adventure is, and then he doesn't want that adventure, so he has to go back and change the adventure, right? That's our lives, right? Okay, there's adventures happening all around us that we're not clued into because we unwisely think that it's our story that's the most important story that's in the book. If we start to try to tune in to the surrounding stories, and we'll hear a little bit and piece of each one of them, and then we take a look at the artifacts and evidence and what they're telling us. In other words, lead where the story is taking us. Don't sit there and go, well, I must force this. You don't force a river. The Royal Gorge wasn't forced. It happened naturally. So when a person is talking to you, what are they going to let in on? They're going to let in, hey, I really need to go home. Hey, I had a traffic stop once where the guy was in a stolen. It didn't know it was a stolen at this point. And the guy goes, look, I don't want to be a dick, but I really got to take a poop. I got to poop. Yeah, of course you got to poop because your catecholamine group is going, should I stay or should I go? And that's one of the things that you're going to do. Now, could it have been another thing? Yeah, but I have to account for the things that are occurring right in front of me. And those stories led nowhere, Brian. I was spinning. I was on a unicycle juggling, and it didn't go anywhere. And just like I said, the who's on first, everybody knows who's on first, second base, right? That story with Lou Costello and Bud Abbott, Abbott and Costello, right? Why does that story make us laugh? Because it goes nowhere. And that's what you're going to get on the traffic stop where you're going, hey, where you headed? Sky's blue. Well, where are you coming from? I need an orange, and you're going, wait a minute, this, discordant answer is not what I would normally expect. Then I start looking and I go, well, the person doesn't smell like alcohol or look like he's on drugs. And I didn't stop them because their driving was such that I would believe they're impaired. So what's this person trying to hide from me? And you know what? It could be a significant other. It could be your kid. It could be a student in your class. You could be HR and wondering why that person's coming in late every day. And they're coming in late because they have to go to the food bank to get food for their kids. So that's where, when you're posting stuff on social media, none of which I see, and I know you get sniped a lot. And I don't mean a lot. I mean, I know you get sniped more than one per posting, right? Which is a lot to me. Because what people want to do, Brian, they don't want to look at the post and learn from it. They want to look at the post and tell their story. LinkedIn is full of people that want to read the story and it says, hey, we've done this and veterans for that and the other. And the guy writes in there, hey, I've been to Hong Kong. What? And you know me, I walk around the room throwing shit going, that was not the point of the story. So I would ask everybody listening to the sound of my voice today, ask yourself, when you drive by something interesting, ask yourself, what's the point of this story? I wonder where this story is going next. What should I see next if my conclusions that I'm making in my head are right? What should I see, smell, and taste and feel next? And then pull over and watch it transpire. One of the greatest things that we do is work away from our families to do in-person training because it allows us to be in an Uber, in a cab, in an area that we're not familiar with, in an airport with people we're not familiar with. And Brian, that's why we stay sharp. Because we're constantly tuned in to those stories that are around us.
Yeah, and you it's the what should I expect to see next? Where is this likely headed? And that's with everything. Right. I do that at home, especially to stay even a step ahead of the insurgent because she's getting so smart, and she's always trying to pull something over or do whatever, or make a couple bucks to go do this because she wants to buy something or this, and it's all good. But because she's always got something going on, and I'm like, all right, well, and so now of course you'll appreciate this because you just reminded me of it. But she's like, she's really down and in on her computer. Like, it's only school stuff on there. I mean, it's not like it's like a school computer. There's no, and I'm like, well, what are you working on? Do you need some help with homework or what's up? She's like, no, leave me, I want to show you something later. I have something, and I'm like, okay, where the F is she going with this? And so she gets her computer later on after dinner, and she's like, all right, and even tries to hook it up to the TV because she wants to give a presentation. And I'm going like, all right, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
So this is going somewhere. And it was all about how she wants to go to online school now, not like for like college later in life or something like that. Now in 6th grade, she wants to go through. So she actually put a presentation together with 10 reasons why. It's an incredible presentation. And I'm going like, what is
level of effort is amazing. Right?
And so she went through and did all stuff. And so I said, all right, first of all, let me be just upfront. Like, that was an incredible presentation. I appreciate how you laid out the artifacts and evidence, the reasons why. I even asked you some questions. She had answers for my rebuttals, even to the point where she's like, okay, I figured you'd ask that. And that brings me to my next point. And I'm like, okay. But the whole time I'm like, where is this coming from? Right. And so I find out, that there's different stuff going on at school, nothing serious or involving her. But then one of her good friends from school last year, I didn't know this, is doing like the half homeschool online. You can do it through a school and like go like once a week and you get a lesson plan.
Right.
And all. So I'm finding out like, one of her best friends is doing that. And that's why she has such compelling arguments. And she looked up why she did this, but it came from that. So the whole time I'm sitting here like, what? Because, my wife is, she's doing are you being bullied at school? Is there a teacher doing something? Like, what is going on? Because obviously the school is the problem, right? And I'm like, no, the issue is she got an idea for a friend and she wants to be at home to do stuff and not have to go to school all day. I was like, well, what kid doesn't want to, not go to school all day? But it was just those,
right. and
so the MLMD TOA,
the insurgent heard. Exactly. The only thing the insurgent heard was the benefits of this program. And she wanted to enlighten you and the wifey to, hey, look how good this was. Now, she's not bringing up any of the other stuff that went along with that. So here's 2 things, though, that made it interesting from what you said, Brian. And this shows that you're a behavior profiler. Okay. You said when you saw some cues early on and up front, well, this is going somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you made the comment later on. You said, where is this coming from? So it's beautiful because what you're doing is you're conducting a test on the environment. You're throwing the rock in the pond and seeing where the ripples go. And folks, this analogy is very simple. You drop a rock in the pond, the ripples go out from the pond. All ponds have ripples. Now, most of those ripples just go to the shore. They come back and then they balance out, meaning they go back to sedentary. Now, what happens most ponds, though, is you have other things that are going on, like life. So now the ripples go out and they hit a lily pad. And when they hit the lily pad, a frog jumped because it was surprised by it. And when that frog jumped, that surprised the bird and the bird flew. Now, 99% of humanity goes, oh, pretty bird. You need to roll the tape back and you need to go, what created the event that I'm in now? And you have to do this quickly. In our world, you have to do it quickly or you get squashed like a bug on a windshield. And then once you do it, you got to latch onto a few artifacts that are in that surrounding and go, okay, this is about school. And the great thing is both you and your wife got it immediately. It's about school. But then once you looked at the usual suspect, teachers, other kid, bullying, this, okay, and it fell drastically short, did it not? And so, okay, well, the issue is who's she palling with and what seed did they plant? What I love is that the explanatory storyline here fit. And we jokingly, Brian and I have a bunch of things like calling a car a Vic and then calling a suspect vehicle a sled. Those are things that are colloquialisms that we get used to. And here, one of the things that I would say is all roads lead to Rome. What does that mean? That means no matter who questioned this person and what OP that I asked, can you tell me what you're seeing? All the artifacts and evidence tended to point in the same direction. Now, Brian, that's not groupthink. What I did is I enlisted the aid of others. I enlisted the aid of trusted people in that environment to say, hey, this is what my daughter presented. What are the things that you can glean from it? And then when I'm given all that big ball of 360 evidence, Brian, now I have a better picture. Now I can draw a more reasonable conclusion. So instead of ready, fire, aim, which most people do, and then they come to the wrong or a conclusion that's severely like I hear cops to this day testify because there's no shortage of those crappy, shitty TV shows. And when you get up at 4 a.m. and you're trying to run and get your metabolism going and stuff, the only thing that's on is for sale stuff and then these crappy crime dramas. And you still hear the cop, go, well, my hackles were, raised when I heard that, and then, my hair in the back of my neck. Shut up with the hunch and give us the clue. Because sometimes, Brian, the clue is so overwhelming that you can't see it in the moment. It's like trying to look straight up at night and see one star. Until you start turning your head and doing the figure eight, you're not going to see that star because you can't. And so what happens when I'm so close to that car and all of a sudden I'm going, hey, 5 jackets, that's unusual. Hey, this guy's got 9 rings on his left hand and 4 watches. Hey, that's unusual. Those type of things didn't give me the bitch slap of reality that I needed. Why? Because something else was going on, and that's life that's going on. That's my stomach is hurting from dicey food at that crappy restaurant where I was 36 hours late for a flight, right? Brian, all of those things are as vivid as the play acting out on the stage in front of me. And if I don't tune in, if I don't look, do you remember when we were with Collier, the shaved ape, and we were trying to train that team for the Colombian Royal Marines? And I took the map out and I took a paper plate that was in the hotel room and I cut the inside of the paper plate out so we just had the big ring. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. White paper plate, cut in the inside circle. You're left with a ring but no plate. And then we took the styrofoam cups and I cut out the bottom of them. And what I was trying to display on the map were the lenses, Brian, right? We have the big wide lens of the whole area. And then with the cup, we have a smaller lens, a much smaller lens. And then with the point of the pencil, this is where we are now. So to consider everything in motion, I have to consider more than the things that are right in front of me that I'm seeing. I have to anticipate what else might be going on. And if I don't scratch the surface, then it's just going to be, hey, get the dustpan and the broom. There's breadcrumbs on the floor. And that's where most people are, Brian. That's where they stop. They step over the breadcrumbs and never consider that may lead somewhere.
No, and you brought up right there the sort of concentric rings there, but what you are seeing, if I'm only right, if I'm using just the styrofoam cup, right, that's a small circle, so that's all I'm seeing. Well, there's a bigger circle, and then the circle goes out from there, and it continues on and on and on throughout the entire world, right? Eventually, you can get that plate big enough, holding from outer space, and put the entire globe, inside of it.
And you don't have to touch a thing; it's all going to fit, right?
So that's the point. Is that and you bring it up is one because we asked too, we walked through it about how I can prime myself for those kind of things. Is that in those moments when you're looking at those breadcrumbs, you're only seeing it right there in front of you, and you're not taking that step back, that 30,000 foot view, and go, how does this play out, or how does this how does this affect, or how is this involved with literally the rest of the environment, the rest of the scene, the rest of the world, the rest of everything that's going on? Because that's when
the rest of my day. You got to go up and down. You got to focus pull. You're exactly right.
And then you can theoretically wind the tape back. How do I hit rewind real quick and determine where this likely came from? Because that trajectory will tell me where this is likely going next. And that's being able to go forward and back in time. Obviously, you can't literally do that, but you can figuratively, and you can with hypothesis testing and asking those questions. But how did this end up right here? Is always the most important thing. It's like anytime I see a piece of trash on our front lawn because of where it's at, it's like, well, wait a minute, how did this end up here? Okay, it's a can of Modelo. Sure, I drink Modelos, but one, there's a little bit left in the bottom, so I know it's not from me. Two,
it's not ringed with meth for that Modelo margarita, as you call it.
So it's but every one of those things is like it ended up in this place in some for some reason. So being able to wind the tape forward and back in real time is actually is sort of priming yourself. And it's the same why I brought up the story the Insurgent to fit in here, and I just thought of it because it happened the other night. Is okay, where did this come from? Where is this going? And then now, because she's a kid, it's like, all right, well, who did she hear this from? Or is there something actually going on? Or she just had some time and said, I'm going to put something together because she knows I make her, well, tell me, prove it, show me the story, prove what you want to do, lay it out for me in a logical manner. Because I've been teaching her that forever, because that's how you win. Because it was a compelling story and it was great. Now it's a different situation where we're parents, now, so it's like, no, you're not doing that. But the idea was
she's demonstrated her thought process too.
Yeah.
Right? She's demonstrated to you her analysis. And why is that important? Because post-blast analysis, battle damage assessment, all those words come from a place of after-action review. Where do we learn from the last experience so we can pay it forward? That's one thing. So time is irrelevant. Time is the most important thing and the least important thing in everything you do. Why do I mean that? Because somebody right now is going, well, I don't have the luxury of time when I get a call about a guy shooting. Well, you have all the luxury of time, because it's going to end like this. You're going to run, you're going to be out of breath, you're going to scream, and then it's going to be bang, 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 bang. And then one of you or the other person is going to be dead. Every single video is the same. So if you don't slow time down, that's the inevitability of what you're about to get into. And every single gunfight, if you're only seeing the entire incident from your front sight post, then you're holding that very small lens up to a huge map. Where am I involved in this? Are there multiple shooters? Is this just a grievance shooting and the person is done, and maybe I can save a life, and maybe it's the shooter's life? And all of those considerations, Brian, that's where we should be training, but we're not. We're flipping the tires, climbing the rope, and we're just pushing rounds down range. So you're going to be an efficient killer, unless that video I sent you this weekend where, oh my gosh, how many rounds you got to fire to kill just one guy. But the idea is that that's the end of everything. I don't care about the end of everything. I care about all that stuff that happens in the middle. And if you're in the middle, which you are, you're always parachuting right into the middle of your own life, then do I have the ability to use a continuum to play it backwards a few seconds and to play it forwards a few seconds? And that's what we teach. We give the gift of time and distance. How many times have I harped on it for as long as I've known you that the is capitalized? And I know you hate it every time that I say that, but you know why? Because it is the gift, and it is time and distance. And if we can master that part of physics, we're going to have an incredible life. I've had 40 plus years of danger, and I'm still here. And people still sometimes listen to me. I don't know. And, after the podcast switch, I hope it's still a big number. But the idea is, Brian, that we learned from our mistakes, and we learned that you're never stationary. Neutral gets you nowhere. You're always in motion, and that the things around you are in motion too. And so if you can't put your thumb on the globe to stop it from spinning, then you have to move with it and be able to move your timeline backwards and forwards. How many times do I give that gosh damn wonkavator? It's not an elevator. It's a wonkavator. It goes sideways and upways and downways and backwards.
Yeah.
That's life. If you get the wonkavator in your head, you're going to be safer, smarter, and harder to kill tomorrow, because you're going to play those what ifs. And Brian, the what if that you gave, hey, this is going somewhere. That means that you now acknowledge the fact that you're in something. And then the second thing was that, hey, look, where's this coming from? The same thing when the guys were giving me the diarrhea of the mouth on the traffic stop. Where's this coming from? It's, I'm lost. I'm headed to work. Hey, I hate cops. I mean, there's like 4 responses I was anticipating, and I got the other one. I got did you know that deciduous trees like the elm? What? Where did this come from? So
right.
Anytime that you get a non-standard observation, anytime, you have to categorize that based on the baseline, and you have to do it quickly. Internal, external, baseline. I've seen this before, and it turned into a shit sandwich. Boy, I'm in an area where there's a high crime, and these people aren't following. There's unorthodox, and the moves that I'm seeing here are anomalous in anybody's book. Once you're there, you're in the trick bag. Now it's, how do I get out? How I've painted myself into a corner. Okay, how do I step out of the kitchen? Is there a window? Is there an ironing board that I can stand on and get me to that chair? That's what we have to do. So guess what the gift of time and distance does? The time and distance means I don't race into the situation, so I have more time to make the decision before I paint myself into the corner. And still, we get people that are on the cusp of understanding that, but they haven't fully invested in it because police cars have sirens on them. And because you think you have to run and get involved in that fist fight right away. Or when somebody's going, hey, my fries are cold, you want to step in and intercede and be the good friend. And Brian, you don't see the whole picture. And that's where the evidence tape comes in. That's where the homicide unit is on the way. And so we can avoid that by giving yourself just nanoseconds. We're not talking about taking 30 minutes out of your day. We're talking about a few extra well-placed seconds during every 24 hours. And everybody's got that time.
No, and you brought it. Yeah, I mean, you brought up with the sort of you're parachuting into the middle of a situation. I mean, but that's every situation you're in life. When I walk into the house and my wife is talking to the insurgent, I just parachuted into something, which means there was something going on before, and there will be something after when I leave.
And will be when you're exactly. That's brilliant. That's a brilliant analogy.
And that's how I handle it. I'm not going to come in off the top rope and go, "Are you guys arguing about this again?" Or what's going? Because one, that's certainly not going to make the situation any better.
Yep.
But two, developing that, the operational picture for what I'm actually walking into allows me for a better intervention strategy. You know what I mean? And that's and I use this stuff here at home because if you can do it in your house, you can do it anywhere. I mean, that's my thing is focusing on that. And that's why we even talked about last week is that focusing on the background noise, the vanilla, everything that's laying around. Like my place is chaos right now because we're getting a little bit of work done, but it's like the rain keeps coming. So things get delayed and there's stuff laying out. So I have to sit here and go, I have to accept the fact that I can't start on this next part of the yard project I want to do until this part's done, and it's chaos. And there was a tree. We had this big, beautiful tree back here that because of all the rain, the winds, it smashed and it broke down on top of it. And it looked like it was just one branch. I tried to clean it out and it wasn't. So I was like, all right, to me, it's all chaos. So I have to then reset sort of my baseline to be like, it's going to be chaos for the next 3 weeks, and then I can start on these things. So now it's like a way to deal with it right here at home. But then that helps me every time I leave my house. That helps me everywhere I go. I mean, that's the point.
Use that, pay that forward, because it is the point. It's exactly the point. Brian just used a term because he's thinking in the moment. He used the term intervention strategy because he wanted to describe what he was doing. And intervention strategy is de-escalation. It's baselining the environment, understanding what elements are within my control and which are not, and which key points are ripe for failure. Which pinch points, if I don't do something right now, it'll turn into something much worse. I better sandbag that door or the water will come in. I better move the tree or it'll take down the electric line. Look, that's life. That's the essence of life. And what I mean by de-escalation isn't this clinical term of de-escalation that police officers have adopted. De-escalation is how can I smooth corners for the rest of my life to make things easier. And Maslow had it right at the very beginning because Maslow said, man, wouldn't it be great if there was a key to this stuff and these things are important. But what Maslow relegated that to is a checklist, and it was too rigid and it was too small, and we can go on and on. But the idea is your goal by saying, I'd like to create an intervention strategy is attainable for everybody on this call today. My intervention strategy is going to be this. I'm going to talk to my wife, significant other, or father. I'm going to take my car for the lube, oil, and filter. I'm going to, now, those are the intervention strategies. To what end? So our marriage is better. So I'm not fighting with my kids all the time. So my engine's not grinding and the light's not coming on.
Those are giving,
it's that simple.
And they're giving you options, right? So you're creating options, that you have, and they depending on the situation, they might not be great options, but having options is better than just responding to what's happening, right? It might not be the best thing, but you at least it's your plan now and not the other person's plan.
You're exactly right. So sadly, I have to have noise in the back. Big, wonderful house. I got the Jobs. The Jobs, is absolutely silent. Job that makes no noise, doesn't bark, doesn't do anything. It's just such a loving, wonderful dog. God, I don't know what her history is. I just hope she's better now. But then as I've got the shows on in the background, I always watch like cooking shows or how to self-improve. I like that kind of stuff. I don't like the angry cook-off, and I don't like the people fighting to win a prize. It's not for me. But the commercials always go back to a cops style show that's coming up about something. And then they show a vehicle fleeing and a vehicle spins out of control. Then they show the cop and the cop goes, during those moments, you're just not thinking. And then the next thing they show this and that and the other in the shootout. Well, it's impossible to be thinking during a situation like this. Why do they show the worst, Brian? Why do they show? If you're sitting there telling me that you're not thinking when you're involved in these critical incidents, then you need to go back to training. You need to slow your roll because you are headed for a collision. As a cowboy, we used to call that riding for a fall. And Brian, you know what I'm talking about. You're out there skating on thin ice and you're riding for a fall. And when you do fall, somebody is going to get hurt because you're telling me right now, I went through the entire situation and I didn't think. Now, that's not it at all. All of life is a thinking person's game, and either get on or be a number, be a victim.
Yeah, no, I that's another great way to look at it is, you can how do I think my way out of this situation in every situation that I'm in for my advantage or for a better outcome. And that's sort of
or a different outcome.
Well,
it doesn't even have to be a better outcome when the chips are down and you're at that inevitable shoot, don't shoot, all that other stuff.
That's what I mean.
Maybe, I agree. I agree. I just want to make that distinction.
The options might not be great, but if you're getting them faster and you're getting to apply your options, then you're controlling the situation as well. I mean, it's not always going to be good options for sure, depending on what you have to do or what the situation is.
John Wayne in what was John Wayne, the one-eyed Rooster Cogburn in the film that True Grit. So the original John Wayne True Grit I saw every Sunday night for 13 years because that was the incoming film, because a lot of that was shot around the ranch, right? And so everybody wanted to see that film because it wasn't ad nauseum on television. And during one part, he tells the person, I don't want to shoot you and you don't want to be dead. And that was the greatest form of intervention, right? That was an intervention strategy and a de-escalation thing. Now, that might not work for everywhere, but what he was trying to say is, I've seen what might happen next. And if we rein it in right now with the gift of time and distance, it's a different option.
Well,
right? I mean, that's beautiful.
And you both, it's showing that you, hey, this is where it's headed, and neither of us want it to go there.
Yep.
So why don't we work together and create something
There's
better?
some way out of this other than, exactly. I'm totally in agreement with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, we covered a lot on here, and kind of operationalizing information is what we're talking about again. But I definitely want to get into this and have some of your stories, and I appreciate you sharing those. And I know folks, you guys can read the full story. Because there's some great sort of case studies in there and examples that you talk about in that. From the news, and so there's some really, really good cases in there that people can read about and see exactly what you were talking about within the context of that story. I just wanted to bring it out and show this is a perfect example of connecting the dots and how it can be difficult, given the limits of cognitive performance and attention, and given time and distance, and given just how we prime ourselves to think. And so that was the big thing, which is why we kind of got into in the last part of the discussion, was what I wanted was that, well, how do I prime myself to think differently, to create different outcomes? And that's the whole point of it, right? And that's how we that's the big application of us with HBPRNA and what we do. Yeah, we get into a lot of areas and we do consulting with it with different firms on all kinds of different topics, but the either way, out of all of them, one, our process is similar because we look at demonstrations of intent and everything behind HBPRNA. But the whole point is driving to a better decision faster, a more beneficial outcome for whoever our client is, obviously, or whoever's listening to this podcast. Even, what's the best outcome for all, or for you. I mean, depending on what it is. But that's the whole point about connecting those dots and taking that time to realize you're in a fluid, dynamic world all the time. Even if you're sitting at that lake all alone where those ripples are going out, Greg, it doesn't matter. There's things that happen before you, and there are things that are going to happen after you, and it's constantly in a state of flux. So being able to connect those dots, like you said, with that constellation in the sky, looking up and go, wow, that's chaos up there. Well, no, there's the Big Dipper. There's this is how that's how you make sense.
So we know that's east, and that helps me find north. Exactly, Brian, spot on.
So any other final? Yeah, clarity is good. Let's see, any other final words?
Just one quick thing. We talk about on-duty roll call a lot. Don't get mesmerized by what we're talking about and lose focus. I don't care what you do. If you're working at an automotive store, or if you're working at City Market, or if you're working as a part of the crew that's going to go roofing, take a knee this morning. Talk about it. Hey, remember, sawdust on the roof plus an extension cord equals falling to your death. Let's not do that. Hey, good morning. Remember, the doors in the back are locked, so if we get a fire alarm, everybody's got to go out this way. Whatever the news is right there, a little bit of a pep talk, a little bit of a, hey, remember when. And Brian, you know that we wrote 100 lessons learned for exactly that. Okay, if you find yourself in a similar situation, this is how I got out of it. And guess what? In that one thing that they're going to read, if they get on Patreon, there's probably 10 or 12 different instances that you could use for that good on-duty roll call. And they're free. Okay, so if you want to use them. Just go out there and make sure that at the beginning of whatever event that you're about to do, whether it's a run, whether it's your workout, whether it's kissing the family goodbye before you go to work, have that little moment of clarity in on-duty roll call where you bring up just something. Can you imagine, Brian, if you got an inch better every day,
well,
where you'd be in a year?
Come on. The priming. That's the cognitive warm up. I mean, it just thought of the.
I agree.
Because you brought the roofing example in Japan on construction sites, they have people come in and so for the first 15 or 20 minutes they do these like almost little calisthenic light warm ups where they're moving their arms and their legs and it's like, okay, yeah, that's good for health reasons, but it's like, no, but that's also really good psychologically to say you are now at work on a construction site where there's danger. You have to be prepared physically, mentally, emotionally for what you're going to do. And it's another analogy we could spend a whole podcast episode on, but that cognitive warm up, that priming is exactly, that's how you do it before you leave the house, every day. But
And when the stakes are higher, guess what? Spend a few more minutes.
Yeah, exactly. When it is something that's going to be, there's that heightened chance of something going wrong, then yeah, that is when you especially take those extra few moments, and that those alone are what that mitigates so many potential problems.
Yes.
And it's so simple to do. So just want to reiterate that, I guess. Well, we appreciate everyone for tuning in. Thanks, Greg, for sharing those stories. And again, head up to the Patreon. You can find the links in the episode details. We've got so much more on there. We've got the new tier that started. And so we've got all kinds of different behavior breakdowns and the Instagram explanation stuff and different cases and the lessons learned and even more coming up. And we're just going to keep adding to that. So I think everyone will enjoy it quite a bit. And thank you everyone so much for tuning in. Please share an episode with your friends if you enjoyed it. And leave us a review or rating. That helps out a lot. And don't forget that training changes behavior. No, I think that's a perfect spot to end on. And thanks, everyone for listening in. Like I said, we got, you can always reach out to us at the humanbehaviorpodcast@gmail.com. You can find more on Patreon. If you enjoy it, please share it with a friend. Leave us a review. All that stuff helps kind of get the message out there, and we appreciate you for doing that and for listening in. And don't forget that training changes behavior. That's all for today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. We do appreciate it. If you'd like more information or deeper dive on anything that we talked about, you can always sign up at our Patreon site or reach out to us at thehumanbehaviorpodcast@gmail.com.